I am an evil monster. I will destroy you.
Hello again, flotsam stormtroopers. How is everyone doing today? You know, back when I was a kid, I used to hate talking to old people. Because old people would always tell you stories. Stories about how great things used to be. How lousy they are now compared to how good they used to be.
When I was young, gas was 28 cents a gallon. Gallons were bigger, too. Great big gallons we used to have, and you could just get buckets and buckets of gas for 28 cents of these big gallons. And when I was your age, bread was only a nickel a loaf. Not like this crummy bread you get these little loaves. Back then it was a nickel and you got a loaf was as big as a Volkswagen. It was big, but no one drove Volkswagens. Only the Germans drove Volkswagens. We didn't drive. In America, we drove Buicks. We had big cars with fins and chrome, big chrome fins. And we could afford to drive those big cars because gas, did I tell you, gas was 28 cents a gallon? Not ordinary gallons, big gallons, because the cars were big, we needed big gallons to drive the big cars.
So now I'm getting old, and I guess it's just something about old people. You know, I have the urge to tell stories about when I was young, too. For instance, I remember when I was a kid, there was such a thing as penny candy. And penny candy would cost like a penny. Oddly enough, most penny candy cost 2 cents. You know, nowadays you go buy a candy bar, it's like 80 cents or $1. There's no such thing as penny candy. There's no such thing as penny anything. I'll tell you why there's no more penny candy. Because it sucked. It was terrible. It was awful stuff. Remember they had that pink chewing gum? I think it was called chum gum. Chum, like his friend. It was like little pieces of laminated cardboard painted pink. You know, apparently they thought if they named it chum gum, you'd think the stuff was your friend. Well, it wasn't. It was terrible. It was like they took little pieces of cardboard, laminated them together with glue, set them out in the sun, sucked every ounce of moisture they could out of them. So that by the time you got them and chewed them and paid a penny, put them in your mouth, with the first chew, this little brittle piece of gum would just turn into dust in your mouth. And you'd have these little rocks and pieces of dust in your mouth chewing away, and it would just crunch and crunch. I mean, you know, think of it. Think of the concept. We had crunchy bubble gum. You know, and usually you would just get the stuff, chew on it for 3 or 4 minutes, and just go and blow the dust out of your mouth and go on to something else. But as kids, every once in a while you were determined to blow that bubble. So you just keep chomping and chomping and chomping for 10, 15 minutes, and your mouth would just keep producing more and more saliva and adding it to this gum. You could feel after about 5 minutes it started to soften up just a little bit. Like, you know, you could tell that some of those little pink pebbles were getting wet. And if you kept at it and ground away and just kept adding more and more saliva to it, eventually it softened up. It actually became bubble gum after a while. And then you'd go and try and blow that bubble. But by then you'd be too weak from dehydration, and you'd try and blow that bubble and then you get lightheaded and then you'd pass out. You know, that was another trip to the nurse's office. Like I said, a lot of the penny candy was 2 cents. Remember Snaps? You could get a box of Snaps. You know, if you were wise, instead of buying 2 pieces of the sandpaper bubblegum, maybe you'd save up and get a box of Snaps. I don't remember if you remember those. Those were like little tubes of black licorice. They had candy coating on the outside, so they were multicolored. Same company that made the chum gum, I think, also made these Snaps because they were rock hard. You know, they're like little pieces of macaroni-shaped porcelain with different colored glazes in it, and they would just bake them in the oven, I think, and then you'd chew on them, and again, you know, first chomp, you'd have a mouthful of this brittle porcelain stuff. Quite a lot of the candy we had was very similar. You just put it in your mouth, chomp on it once, and dust would come out. Or for 2 cents, you could also get a box of pumpkin seeds. Remember pumpkin seeds? You know, there's a healthy product. It was like a pound of rock salt with a seed hidden in the middle somewhere. And you'd put that thing in and you'd suck on it and kind of gum on it, chew on it, trying to chip away the rock salt, try and find a pumpkin seed. You know, I never did actually meet a kid who actually ever got to the seed. You know, again, you'd see him working at it till dehydration set in. You know, if you chewed that bubble gum first and then ate pumpkin seeds, you know, there's a good chance you would just die of dehydration. They just find you like a little kid-shaped prune laying out in the playground all shriveled up. I think another great candy idea that we used to have for penny candy was you could buy candy cigarettes. How's that for a great role model thing? When you're little, it looked like a little thin piece of chalk, only not as tasty. It was like a hard, chalky kind of candy that came in a little cigarette package. And then they would paint one end red so you'd think it was on fire. We could walk around playing like we were smoking, and you could tell the heavy smokers because they had chalk all over their lips all the time. Those were popular around Halloween. You look in your bag and you had all kinds of these little packs of cigarettes in there. Those were the cheap cigarettes. The really good ones, which you never got, were actually little rolls of chocolate, and they actually had paper around them, wrapped just like a cigarette paper. Had that real look and feel of a genuine cancer-causing cigarette. That was a real joy to get one of those. We used to have those little bottles of sugar water made out of wax. You bite the top off and drink the stuff. You know, back in those politically non-correct days when you had candy cigarettes, I think they missed an opportunity when they didn't make those little beer bottles or little whiskey bottles. I think that would have been really cool. That's the kind of stuff that made childhood fun. That's why we like to reminisce and talk about our childhood, because, yeah, those were the good old days. So till next time, please keep all hands and feet inside the ride till it comes to a complete stop. Oh, time for another story? Just shut up.